Hi, I'm Nicolas Cage, and I'm gonna rewatch some scenes throughout my filmography.
In 2007, Nicolas Cage outbid Leonardo DiCaprio for a dinosaur skull. He owned 2 castles, a private island, and a pet octopus worth $150,000. Then the real estate crash hit like a hammer. Within months, the IRS placed liens on everything he owned. His net worth plummeted from $150 million to nothing. Desperate to survive, he accepted roles in 29 straight-to-video films just to pay creditors. But his biggest mistake wasn't buying castles or exotic animals. It was trusting the wrong person with his fortune. The betrayal nearly destroyed him forever. Nicholas Kim Coppola was born on January 7, 1964, in Long Beach, California, into a family where brilliance and darkness collided. His father, August Floyd Coppola, taught comparative literature, and his mother, Joy Vogelsang, was a dancer and choreographer whose German and Polish roots added even more complexity to the bloodline. On his father's side, the lineage was pure Italian. His grandfather was the composer Carmine Coppola, and his grandmother was actress Italia Pennino. That made Francis Ford Coppola his uncle. Talia Shire was his aunt. Sofia Coppola, Roman Coppola, Jason Schwartzman, those were just his cousins. From the outside, it looked like Hollywood royalty. But inside the house, it was something else. His mother suffered from both schizophrenia and severe depression, and that reality gripped his childhood like a shadow that never let go. He would later say she slipped into long stretches where she didn't remember anything. When he was just 6 years old, she began being institutionalized. By 12, the marriage had collapsed under the weight of her illness. She vanished for years at a time, lost in psychiatric hospitals, undergoing electroshock therapy. He learned to emotionally detach. He studied her episodes like science. That's how he coped. His father raised him in Long Beach, and Nicholas would later explain that children of schizophrenics often became what he called superfrenetics. They were hypervigilant, high-strung overachievers. He said Charlie Chaplin was one of them too. At 15, he got his first taste of Hollywood. A small part in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Just one of Brad's nameless buddies in a burger joint. They credited him as Nicholas Coppola, and it backfired immediately. The crew and cast wouldn't stop mocking him with lines from Apocalypse Now. He was just a kid, the only real teenager on set, surrounded by adults quoting his uncle's movies. Child labor laws cut his hours. The jokes cut deeper. One day, he'd had enough. He changed his name to Nicolas Cage, half inspired by Luke Cage, a comic book hero, half by John Cage, the avant-garde composer. He wanted a clean break. The industry saw it as rebellion. Francis Ford Coppola shut doors. Casting agents turned him away, but Cage stuck to it. At 17, he dropped out of Beverly Hills High School. He was tired of classrooms, tired of waiting. He wanted the movies, and when most of his scenes in Fast Times were cut, he took a minimum wage job at the Fairfax Cinema. He sold tickets. He sold popcorn. He stood at the back of the theater between shifts and stared at the screen, asking himself how he'd get from here to there. He later said that's when cinema became everything. He also delivered pizzas. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival. What saved him wasn't the family name. It was an audition. He was brought in to read lines for actors trying out for Rumble Fish. The film was directed by his uncle Francis, but Cage wasn't handed anything. He landed a small role. At the same time, he shot Valley Girl, which came out first and became his real breakthrough. It was a tiny production shot in 22 days for around $350,000. It earned over $17 million. He played Randy, a punk rocker in a Romeo and Juliet spin. He shaved his chest hair into a V at the director's request. He screamed until veins popped. He made himself unforgettable. The director only made $5,000. Cage made a career. Back on Rumble Fish, He threw himself into the part. He changed his look, committed to a distinct voice, mannerisms, anything that made the role feel lived in. It didn't matter if it was only a supporting character. He was proving something. And then came The Outsiders. He wanted the role of Dally. He locked himself in a room for 2 weeks, staring at a photo of Charles Bronson, trying to become the role. His uncle turned him down again, gave the part to Matt Dillon, offered Cage a smaller role as a consolation. Cage said no. He wasn't interested in handouts. He later showed up uncredited in a background fight scene just to be on set. Years later, when The Godfather Part 3 was being cast, Francis again passed him over, gave the role to Andy Garcia. That wound never closed. In 1984, he took on The Cotton Club, again under Francis Ford Coppola. The film was chaos. The budget ballooned to $58 million. There were more than 30 script drafts, 5 of them written in a single 48-hour binge. But the real darkness came off screen. One of the producers, Roy Radin, was murdered, shot in the head and blown up with dynamite by a hitman. A drug dealer named Karen Greenberger ordered it. She was afraid of losing her $50,000 cut. The case became known as the Cotton Club murder trial. Cage, just 20, was thrown into the center of Hollywood's underbelly. That same year, he made Birdie. He played a wounded Vietnam vet. To feel the pain, he had 2 baby teeth pulled without anesthetic, wrapped his head in bandages for 5 weeks, slept in them, lived in them. When he took them off, his skin was wrecked. Acne, ingrown hairs. But the camera saw something real. Birdie didn't make much money, but it won the grand jury prize at Cannes. Cage proved he'd go through hell for a role. He wasn't slowing down. In Racing with the Moon, also in 1984, he acted opposite Sean Penn. Set during World War II. Coming of age. Cage played a wild jock named Nicky. In one scene, Penn's character punched a rich kid for nearly hitting them with a bowling ball. Cage cleaned the blood off the guy's girlfriend. For another scene, Cage cut himself with a knife to get into the emotion. It was dangerous, but directors started to see what he could bring. In 1986, he transformed again for The Boy in Blue, a Canadian biopic about a 19th-century rowing champion named Ned Hanlon. Cage gained up to 30 pounds of muscle, learned how to row, trained like a real athlete. The film bombed at the box office, but he got nominated for a Genie Award, Canada's version of the Oscars. Even in failure, he stood out. Then came Peggy Sue Got Married, another Coppola film, another mess. Cage played Charlie, the romantic lead, and made the wild choice to give his character a strange nasal voice based on a clay horse named Pokey from The Gumby Show. It infuriated his co-star, Kathleen Turner. She begged Francis to stop him. Cage also wore fake teeth. Turner was miserable. The crew worked 20-hour days, 6 days a week, under a tight deadline that Francis couldn't miss. When the movie came out, the performance was so strange that even Francis later said he regretted approving it. It was the last time they worked together. In 1988, Nicolas Cage starred in one of the strangest performances ever captured on film. In Vampire's Kiss, he played Peter Lowe, a delusional literary agent spiraling into madness, convinced he was turning into a vampire. To bring the insanity to life, Cage didn't just act strange. He swallowed live cockroaches. Not 1, not 2, but 3. The director made him do a second take just to mess with him, and the original script didn't even call for bugs. It was supposed to be raw eggs. But Cage, inspired by Ozzy Osbourne biting the head off a bat in 1982, pushed for something more shocking. Years later, in 2023, Cage admitted he regretted it deeply, saying he'd never do it again. But that moment, as disturbing as it was, became a stepping stone for what Cage later called his nouveau shamanic acting method, a style defined by wild eyes, loud outbursts, and physical extremes. Just a year before the Cockroach Madness, Cage had already shown a very different side in Moonstruck. Released in December 1987, the film paired him with Cher in a Brooklyn romance full of humor and heartbreak. He played a hot-headed, one-handed baker who steals his brother's fiancé's heart with raw passion and one unforgettable line, "Snap out of it!" The film won 3 Oscars, including Best Actress for Cher, Best Supporting Actress for Olympia Dukakis, and Best Original Screenplay for John Patrick Shanley. Cage was nominated too, and the movie was a box office hit, proving he wasn't just weird, he could move people. Then came 1990, and with it 2 more roles that couldn't have been more different. First was Firebirds, a military action film where Cage played Jake Preston, an elite U.S. Army helicopter pilot. It was his first true action movie, released May 25, 1990, and filmed using real Apache helicopters with help from over 100 military personnel. Despite all the realism, the movie earned just over $6 million opening weekend, and critics bashed it as a Top Gun knockoff with helicopters. Still, Cage powered through, showing he was willing to dive into explosions and cockpit drama just as hard as he had thrown himself into roach eating. That same year, Cage took a wildly different turn in David Lynch's Wild at Heart. He played Sailor Ripley, a snakeskin jacket-wearing Elvis-obsessed lover on the run with Laura Dern. That jacket wasn't just a costume, it was Cage's own, bought at a second-hand store on Melrose and kept in his closet for a year before he found the perfect role for it. The jacket made it into the script, along with Sailor's line that it symbolized his individuality and belief in personal freedom. The film premiered at Cannes in 1990, won the Palme d'Or, and still managed to send 300 people walking out of early test screenings due to its graphic violence and sex. It only made $14 million on a $10 million budget, but it left a lasting impression and gave Cage a role where he could channel Elvis without apology. Before all that, though, in 1989, Cage went far off the beaten Hollywood path with Time to Kill, an Italian-French war drama set during Italy's invasion of Ethiopia in 1936. Filmed in Zimbabwe, the movie had Cage play a soldier battling pain and guilt in foreign terrain, supported by a cast of European actors and a score by Ennio Morricone. It was experimental, quiet, and a stark contrast to his American blockbusters. The film didn't leave much of a mark, holding just a 5.0 rating on IMDb from around 1,099 votes, but it proved Cage wasn't afraid to take risks, even if it meant leaving the country and stepping into obscure terrain. By 1992, Cage was back in the spotlight with Honeymoon in Vegas. This time, he played a man who loses $65,000 in a rigged poker game and agrees to let the winner spend a weekend with his girlfriend to clear the debt. The movie ended with Cage skydiving onto the Las Vegas Strip, dressed as Elvis. But the really strange part wasn't in the script. Behind the scenes, Cage was gambling heavily, his real addiction bleeding into the character. Director Andrew Bergman thought the comedy was pure fiction, but Cage's off-camera habits turned it into something darker. Those binges foreshadowed the massive debts he would rack up in the 2000s, showing that his deep dive into characters sometimes came with consequences that stuck. Then came the role that won him an Oscar. In 1995, leaving Las Vegas put Cage in the shoes of Ben Sanderson, a man who drinks himself to death after losing everything. He didn't just act drunk, he got drunk. Cage attended 12-step meetings, read medical studies, and downed real liquor during scenes. Director Mike Figgis confirmed that in one scene, Cage was so intoxicated he could barely stand. The realism won him Best Actor, but it tore apart his personal life. He'd married Patricia Arquette in April 1995, but they separated just 9 months later. They were legally married until 2001, but emotionally it ended with the film. That role, so raw and powerful, cost him more than any paycheck ever could. Just a year later, Cage turned from pain to pure adrenaline in The Rock. Released in 1996, it grossed $335 million worldwide on a $75 million budget and became the 4th highest-grossing movie of the year. He played FBI chemist Dr. Stanley Goodspeed, opposite Sean Connery. But what made the role brutal wasn't the acting, it was the stunts. Cage sprinted through a set filled with simulated VX gas, a nerve agent so deadly that even the fake version caused him temporary vision loss. His breathing problems and convulsions in the film weren't all acting. The film's expert consultants had matched every symptom to CDC documentation, and the realism pushed Cage's body to its limits. Then came Con Air in 1997. Cage transformed into Cameron Poe, a long-haired Army Ranger trapped on a hijacked prison plane. It opened June 6th on 2,824 screens and made $24.1 million in its first weekend, eventually raking in $224 million worldwide. With a $75 million budget, it pulled in a $149 million profit. It was loud, violent, and packed with memorable moments, but none more iconic than Cage growling, "Put the bunny back in the box." The line wasn't even in the script. He made it up on the spot, and it became a pop culture sensation. But the shoot wasn't without tragedy. On August 29, 1996, stuntman Philip Swartz was killed during the Las Vegas crash landing scene when a static model of the plane fell on him. Behind the explosions, someone paid with their life. Later that same year, Cage starred in Face Off, playing both villain and hero as he and John Travolta swapped identities. The surgery scene required advanced 3D face scans and terrifyingly realistic robotic replicas. Cage was so disturbed by seeing his own synthetic double that the set had to be cleared so he could compose himself. The fake Cage had breathing bladders, moving eyes, and hair so detailed it felt like looking into a mirror after death. The prosthetics irritated his skin, and the process wore on him physically, but the film became a monster hit, earning $245 million worldwide, with $112.2 million from the U.S. alone. It joined The Rock and Con Air as Cage's holy trinity of 90s action films. Nicolas Cage made around $20 million for National Treasure in 2004, a film that pulled in $347.5 million worldwide. But the story didn't stop at box office numbers. That success sparked something strange in him. He became obsessed with real-world treasure. He bought a 67-million-year-old dinosaur skull for $276,000 in 2007, outbidding Leonardo DiCaprio. He didn't know it had been stolen from Mongolia. When authorities came calling, he gave it back. No refund, no apology, just gone. The same year, he bought the LaLaurie Mansion in New Orleans for $345 million. That house was infamous for torture, blood, and ghost stories. It was once owned by Delphine LaLaurie, a known serial killer. 2 years later, in November 2009, the property was auctioned off for $5.5 million during his financial collapse. He had chased the mystery too hard, and now it was turning on him. Back in 1995, Cage launched his own production company, Saturn Films. He wanted to tell stories that mattered to him. That dream turned into a nightmare with Sonny, his first and only film as a director. Released in 2002, the film had a $4 million budget. It only made 17 739s. It played in just 6 theaters for a single week. That was a 99.6% financial loss. The critics tore it apart. They said he didn't understand the story he was telling. He lost nearly $5 million when you include the marketing. After that, Saturn Films became less about vision and more about survival. He used it to take any role that paid the bills. Then came Ghost Rider in 2007. It made $228.7 million globally, but the cost behind the scenes was brutal. Cage went through an intense 3D X-ray scanning process just to create the flaming skull. He had to stay completely still for hours while his head was mapped by sensors. The team used Maya and Houdini for the fire effects, adjusting them frame by frame. Cage rode 2 bikes during filming, a Buell and a custom chopper called Grace. The shooting days were 12 hours long, drenched in sweat under heavy motorcycle gear. He was already exhausted. That shoot made him rethink action roles. The budget was $110 million, massive for its time, but Cage left it all on the set. In 2006, he took on a more emotional kind of pain. For World Trade Center, he played real-life officer John McLaughlin, one of the men trapped under the rubble on 9/11. To get into the headspace, Cage locked himself in a sensory deprivation tank for hours. He visited Ground Zero. He talked to survivors. He started having panic attacks. Shooting had to be paused again and again as his mental health buckled. The $65 million film finished late, wrapping in early 2006, and grossed $163.2 million. But Cage walked away, shaken and emotionally burnt out. He wouldn't touch a film like that again for years. He had always been a Superman fan. He bought Action Comics #1, the 1938 comic where Superman first appeared, for $110,000 in 1997. Then it got stolen from his home in 2000. He got the insurance money, but he never forgot it. In 2011, it turned up inside a storage locker in the San Fernando Valley. That November, Cage sold it at auction for $261,000. He didn't have a choice. The IRS wanted $6.2 million from him, and he was desperate. It ended up being a 1,064% return over 14 years. But the money wasn't joy. It was a lifeline. Around the same time, he named his son Kal-El, Superman's Kryptonian name. He had once been considered for a Superman movie himself. That dream, like many others, slipped away. Between 2008 and 2009, it all collapsed. Cage had 15 properties worth over $33 million. He owned castles, Midford Castle in England for $6.3 million and Schloss Niedstein in Germany. He had a $150,000 dinosaur skull, multiple Lamborghinis, a private island, and the haunted LaLaurie Mansion. Then the real estate crash hit. His empire shattered. The IRS placed $13 million in liens on his properties. He owed $14 million in back taxes. To survive, he sold his comic book collection for $8 million. His business manager, Samuel Levin, was blamed for leading him into financial ruin. In October 2009, Cage sued him for $20 million, but the damage was done. Instead of declaring bankruptcy, Cage turned into a one-man movie machine. Between 2010 and 2015, he appeared in 29 direct-to-video films. His name took a beating, but he didn't stop. He needed cash. Fast. "I've got all these creditors and the IRS," he told GQ, "and I'm spending $20,000 a month trying to keep my mother out of a mental institution." He took roles in Season of the Witch, Stolen, Rage, and more. Each one paid between $1 to $3 million over time. He made over $100 million from these lower-tier films. He insisted he never faked a performance. Every scene was real effort. By February 2012, it worked. He paid $6.2 million to the IRS and cleared the 2007 debt. Some of those films nearly killed him. In Drive Angry, Cage did most of the stunts himself. One shootout scene had him driving at nearly 100 mph while actresses clung to the car hood. A real car explosion singed his eyebrows and left him temporarily deaf. He insisted on using real Hellfire missile props. One blew up and sent a crew member to the hospital. He called it Zen mode. He studied dark Kama Sutra positions for his role, and once rode his motorcycle at 100 vb/tour. on the 405 freeway at 3 a.m. just to get into character. He later admitted it was really, really crazy. It didn't stop. In 2013, he took on The Frozen Ground, a gritty film about a serial killer in Alaska. Cage shot scenes in actual 20°C temperatures. Vanessa Hudgens remembered not being able to feel her toes. Cage collapsed during one night shoot from hypothermia and had to be treated before he could finish. He studied real police footage. He trained with Alaska troopers. It was grueling, but the performance got praise. Nicolas Cage met Christina Fulton in 1988. Their relationship lasted 3 chaotic years and brought Cage his first son, Weston Coppola Cage, born in 1990. From the start, it was rocky. Fulton later said Cage tried to control where she went, who she talked to, and how she lived. It ended in 1991, but they stayed tied together through Weston, and things only got messier. In court, Fulton described Cage as jealous and possessive. Years later, in 2025, she filed a lawsuit against both Cage and Weston, who by then was 34. She said Cage never stepped in when Weston became violent, even though he knew about his long struggle with mental illness and assault charges. Cage's next major relationship felt like a fairy tale, at least at first. He met Patricia Arquette in 1987 at Cantor's Deli in L.A. She was just 18. Years later, she returned into his life with drama straight out of a movie. Dressed head to toe in black vinyl and carrying a giant purple wedding cake, she proposed. They got married in April 1995 on a cliff in Carmel. She wore a leopard print jacket. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. The marriage lasted 6 years. But after only 9 months, they separated. They tried to fix things, but the damage was done. Cage missed important family events for reshoots. While he filmed Con Air, she was left alone. Her mother was dying from cancer, and they weren't even living together. Arquette said the fighting never stopped. In 2001, it was officially over. Then came Alice Kim. Cage was 40. She was 19, a Korean-American waitress in Los Angeles. They met in 2004, married the same year in Las Vegas. Their age gap was 21 years. People talked. In 2005, they had a son and named him Kal-El, Superman's birth name. Cage had always loved comic books. This marriage would become his longest, lasting 12 years, but it wasn't peaceful. In 2011, Cage was arrested in New Orleans after grabbing Alice's arm and hitting parked cars. He was drunk. There were whispers of cheating while he was off filming. By January 2016, they had separated. By June, it was public. Cage's next marriage didn't even last a week. He married Erica Quake in Vegas on March 23, 2019. 4 days later, on March 27th, he filed for annulment. They had been dating since 2018, but stayed under the radar. Surveillance footage showed them fighting at the courthouse. Cage slurred, "I'm not doing it." Koake replied, "I never asked you to." He said he was too drunk to know what he was doing. He also claimed she hid a criminal past and another relationship. She demanded a payout, saying the press ruined her name. The divorce was finalized on May 31st. In 2011, his custody battle over Weston dragged even stranger parts of Cage's life into public view. He had bought a pet octopus for $150,000 and claimed it helped him act. He spent $276,000 on 2 albino king cobras, Moby and Sheba. They were so deadly he carried anti-venom just in case. He used to drink wine while staring at them and said it felt like they were planning to kill him. Eventually, neighbors threatened to sue, and he gave them away in 2008. He also owned a saltwater shark and a crocodile. Patricia Arquette brought this all up in court, warning that Weston wasn't safe around Cage's exotic lifestyle. His biggest financial mistake came in 2007. He bought a 32-inch Tyrannosaurus bataar skull for $276,000 at an auction, beating out Leonardo DiCaprio. It had serrated teeth and a certificate of authenticity. But in 2014, Homeland Security told him the fossil had been stolen from Mongolia's Gobi Desert. The man who sold it had smuggled fossils for years. Cage gave it back in 2015 and wasn't charged, but he lost all the money. While filming Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans in 2009, director Werner Herzog worried about Cage's performance. He thought Cage had actually used cocaine. Cage hadn't. He used saccharine to mimic the look, but strangely enough, an Australian doctor had treated his sinus infection using real cocaine, which helped him study how it affected movement. Cage used this to craft small details like swallowing and lip smacking. His tax problems nearly destroyed him. In 2012, he paid $257,005 to settle a 2007 tax lien. But that was just part of it. He admitted owing the IRS around $14 million in total. He blamed his business manager and said he had warned him since 2005. To keep up, Cage accepted more film roles than ever. Between 2008 and 2011, he appeared in or produced 11 movies. He never filed for bankruptcy, but he had to sell 15 properties, including castles and a private island. He also sold his comic book collection and rare items like a two-headed snake. His comeback began in 2021 with Pig. It was a small indie film with a $3 million budget, but it changed everything. Cage played a quiet truffle hunter looking for his stolen pig. The movie earned 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. It only made $4.5 million in theaters, but exploded on streaming. By October 2025, it became the 8th most-watched film on Prime Video. It got him his first Critics' Choice nomination since leaving Las Vegas and won him an Independent Spirit Award. Even Quentin Tarantino praised him. By 2025, Cage had climbed out of the hole. His net worth hit $40 million. At his peak, he had been worth $150 million, making $20 million per film. Now debt-free since 2023, he lives in Las Vegas and owns a $10.5 million home in Malibu. He no longer buys islands or octopuses. In Prisoners of the Ghostland, also in 2021, he played a criminal in a surreal samurai dystopian world. It was directed by Sion Sono and premiered at Sundance. It ran for 103 minutes and blended westerns with Japanese aesthetics. Reviews were mixed, but praised the visuals and Cage's wild performance. Around this time, Cage had been collecting Japanese art and manga. Back in 2000, his copy of Action Comics #1 was stolen. It was worth millions. Over a decade later, it was found in an abandoned locker. That comic book, just like his career, had been lost but not forgotten.